Chapter 4. The soldier started down the stairs to the basement cautiously. His eyes looked to the left and to the right, studying the shadowed corners of the room. A burlap bag hung over his shoulder. Malthus was glad to see he was being careful, but he knew that the two of them were alone. Malthus sat at a round table located at the back of the basement. A lantern flickered above the table, hanging from the rafters. He must be worried I'm going to trap him, Malthus thought. And why shouldn't he be? He knows I could ruin him if I wanted. The gods would hang him beside me if they knew he consorted with heretics. He decided to break the silence. What do you see there, Kazakh? Kazakh jumped. This is the safest place you could find to meet? This is one of the most heavily patrolled streets in the entire city. Well, there were safer places to meet, but I thought the proximity would be convenient for you, Malthus smirked. What do you have to be afraid of? You have to remember, I've managed to keep hidden for years. If anyone's going to get you noticed, it's you. Kazakh approached the table, lifted the burlap bag and set it down before Malthus. The lantern light revealed his green scales. Listen, grayscale, my scales may be gray, boy, but yours are tender. Malthus slid a dagger out from his belt, revealing it and slowly setting it on the table. Please remember that I have less need of you than you do of me. You wouldn't want your captain to know about the gold you've been embezzling from the temple coffers, now would you? Kazakh stiffened his chin, but seemed to get the idea. Blackmail is such a powerful weapon, Malthus mused. He reached a hand out and pulled the bag toward him. 3 uniforms. A complete set? Kazakh nodded. Every piece is there. Malthus dropped the bag. Hopefully they fit. Now, I'm sure you're prepared. You know where you need to be and when you need to be there? Yes. I'm glad I don't have to repeat myself then. Go over it yourself anyway. Make sure you know it inside and out. I'll be sending one of my warriors to the temple this evening. He'll need to add his name to the roster. Any sort of duty, so long as he's in the temple. What's his name? Taksu. He's tall, orange scales, red hair. He's always chewing sour root. You'll know him when you see him. If he senses any trouble, he'll report it to me, and I'll act accordingly. I will do everything as we've discussed, Kazakh insisted. I expected nothing less, Malthus replied. I'll see you when the time comes, and hopefully not a moment sooner. Kazakh turned to leave, and as he did, someone else came down the stairs to the basement, passing Kazakh as he left. Shit! That was a summonik? Yes, Zora, it was, Malthus answered. The lantern flame started to wither. Fetch the oil, would you? Zora got the oil from the corner, a ceramic jar that contained little more than 6 nights' worth. The owner of the house, and Malthus's host, probably hadn't expected he would go through so much during his stay. Zora filled the lantern's reserves, giving it the last drop the jar had to offer, and the flame gradually regained its strength. Why was he here? Zora asked. He left alive, so I assume he's helping us? Malthus's gray lips showed a smile. I'll explain it once everyone's arrived. The answer didn't seem to satisfy Zora's curiosity, but he wouldn't ask again. Zora was a young man, not particularly imposing. His scales were teal, and he kept his mossy green hair back in a tail. His thick green beard made him appear grislier than he truly was, older too, and Malthus suspected it was to compensate for his stature. Have you seen any sign of them in the streets? No, chieftain, not yet. Malthus grumbled. I told Conry to be here by midday. They could have gotten lost. In our tour? It's not that hard to find your way. Besides, Conry knows it well enough. Zora took out a dagger and began trimming his nails. He'll show up. He always does. Malthus nodded. Zora was oddly reassuring at times. In all his years, he had never thought he would be where he was. He lived 2 summers shy of 6 decades, and he had at least another 7 ahead of him, if he survived to be as old as his grandfathers did. Time may have faded his blue scales and midnight hair, but his spirit was still youthful and zealous, as hungry for justice as he had been as a young man. It was that hunger and zeal that had taken him to the top of Usolkeji, the clan that he was born into. As one of the clan's 2 chieftains, he had spent his whole life resisting the gods, knowing nothing else but the struggle for freedom that they fought for every day. His body was a testament to that resistance, his scales telling story after story of pain, sacrifice, and victory. The end of that story, he hoped, was a future that did not include the gods. There was a shifting sound upstairs as feet stepped onto the floorboards above Malthus and Zora. A trickle of dust fell from the basement rafters. I'm sure that's them, Zora said. See to it anyway. Malthus found his hand on the grip of his sword, as if it had a mind of its own. He kept it there while Zora went upstairs, moderating his breathing to remain calm. There had been too many narrow escapes in his life for him to not be cautious. Even as he heard familiar voices upstairs, he did not let go of the blade. Zora soon returned with Malthus's 5 remaining warriors, a dark cloak covering each of them. You're late, Malthus said. My apologies, chieftain, said Conry, removing his hood. He was the most imposing of the 6, tall and towering over the rest. His scales were orange, his jawline rigid and masculine, his rust-colored hair wrapped into braids that dangled at his shoulders. Otto got separated from us in the forest, he explained in a deep voice. Otto, short and scrawny, answered, I had to relieve myself, and they went on without me. The yellow scales on his face scrunched in frustration. I don't need to hear it, Malthus said. Have a seat, Conry. The rest of you can stand. Conry took the seat at Malthus's side, but kept his distance. The young man was confident, but lacked arrogance, both reasons why Malthus had chosen him to be his lieutenant. I don't want to waste time, Malthus started. Yataki and Ruko are dead. Malthus suppressed a shudder as he recalled what he had seen that night as he hid in the shadows. They completed their mission. However, the aid that they sought will not be coming. The only consolation we have is that Maura's men didn't catch on to our trail. Malthus gave his warriors his eyes, showing courage in spite of the ill news. Some were afraid, but all were saddened. Yataki and Ruko had been their friends, and for most, their role models. Even Conry, the most level-headed of them, was affected. You are all I have left, the 6 of you, my Thalosai. I haven't had so few warriors in my command since the days of our great persecution. Days you weren't alive to see. Each of your lives has become even more valuable than before, even as inexperienced as some of you are. Don't let that bother you. I've taught you a lot, but now it doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you do. The morning of Maura's feast, we will be gathered at the edge of the woods, outside the Temple Ikari. The feast will be in full swing, starting at sunrise, with the slaughtering of animals, dancing and music and everything else you'd expect at a feast. 2 of you will be dressed as Samanik. Malthus removed one of the uniforms from the burlap bag on the table, a chest piece of brown leather accented with red and black. The rest of us will be in shackles, Malthus finished. Connery's eyes darted toward Malthus's, a subtle tell of his surprise. Chieftain? In shackles? Asked Ray, squinting from under her hood. Zora shook his head. That doesn't sound good to me. What sort of plan is that? Malthus took a breath, ignored their lack of courtesy, and reached into the burlap bag again. He continued, The rest of us, as I said, will be in shackles. He removed a pair from the bag and fastened them on his own wrists. The two who are posing as Salmonique will lead us to the gate of Ikari, and then through the temple as prisoners. The celebrants will see us, no doubt. On any other day, Maura would have heretics such as us made slaves, or interrogated, or thrown into prison to await some abysmal fate. But on the day of the Feast of Blood, his day, he'll want us brought to him so that he can execute us in front of his disciples, something he's done in previous years. Malthus paused to let them catch up. However, that is not how it will end. When we make it so far as to be brought before the god of war, and stand before him face to face, we have never quite made it that far. Malthus jerked his wrists apart, and the shackles fell off and hit the table. We will capture him and execute him before his disciples that day. How can we accomplish that with just the 8 of us? Asked Ray. She glanced back and forth from her peers to Malthus. If we had 2, 3 times the numbers, maybe, but Ruko and Yutaki did what they could, Malthus answered. But there will be no aid from any other parts of the clan. This is an opportunity we can't waste. But you're basing all of this on what you heard from that soldier? You really trust a Salmonique? Asked Zora. Who is this soldier he keeps talking about? Connery asked. He's my informant, Malthus said. I've been careful with him. His name is Kazik. We've been in correspondence since the end of Busan. Zora frowned. I won't lie. This smells like a trap to me, chieftain. Salmonique aren't worth trusting, any more than a godling. Malthus replied, I'm willing to take a gamble if it means we have a chance at changing this world. You're all young. You haven't had to live under the gods for 60 years. You're just learning to put up with it and make do. The gods have been here for 3 centuries with no opposition other than the clans. If you're waiting for the day when they just give up, it will never come. Injustice won't undo itself if you cower in the shadows. You have to do something about it. If we slay Maura, who, like all the other gods, has claimed to be immortal, then our people will see for themselves the lie that has been forced upon them. The Salmonique are the gods' soldiers, trained right here in Atur, in this city. If they see that their master is a fraud, upon whom will they deliver their wrath? He wanted an answer. Zora appeared admonished, now straight-faced. The godlings, he said. Conry's eyes drifted as he imagined the future Malthus spoke of. It would cause revolution. The Salmonique would join the cause of Yusolkeji and the other clans. The gods would have only the Zinite left to defend them. Not only that, Malthus added. His charisma nearly carried him up out of his seat. We Fenari outnumber godlings 10 to 1. The common citizen will rise up against them. The truth will spread all across this land until all of Teshidon is free, and then beyond the seas until it reaches every corner of Fenar. A door creaked open upstairs. The sixth Thalassai drew their daggers, along with Malthus. He was impressed with how quickly they responded. "Wait a moment now," Malthus told them. "I think our gracious host has arrived." A Fenari woman, cloaked in brown, soon came down the steps and into the basement. Daggers were put back in their scabbards, and Conry returned to his seat. The woman doffed her hood. "Malthus, is everyone here that will be coming?" she asked. "Yes, they're all here. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Charlize, our host here in Atur." Charlize nodded and smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you all. Have your travels made you hungry?" Zora's ears perked up at the promise of food. "I'm famished." Ray elbowed him in the side. "You've already been here a few days. We've been walking since sunrise." "I have wine and bread, as well as some fruit I bought this morning," Charlize offered. "Excellent," Malthus smiled. "Why don't you all go upstairs and have your fill before turning in for the night? We can talk over the rest of this in the morning." They all agreed and followed Charlize upstairs. Malthus remained, however, and Conry knew to wait with him. The others went up the steps at a leisurely pace, hoping to eavesdrop, but Malthus shooed them off. "What is it you'd have me do, chieftain?" Conry asked, once they were alone. He leaned in, bracing his forearms on the table. Malthus appreciated his focus. "I need someone on the inside from the beginning. Someone in the temple at the time we carry out our mission." He handed Conry a pin, a diamond-shaped pendant, inlaid with two black swords, clashing over a blood-red shield. Maura's emblem. Conry took the pin into his hands. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, closing a fist around the pin. "Ensure that everything goes according to plan. And if it doesn't, be there to keep it from completely falling apart. For the next day or so, I'll need you to learn the details of the temple layout. I've studied them, but this way someone else will be intimate with them too. Every hall, every closet, every corridor and wet room, as well as the personal quarters of every officer and guard, must be familiar to you by the time we start. You need to know the officers, their names and faces, their position within the hierarchy. You should probe their suspicions, find out if they are expecting anything from us in the near future. Or worse, the next few days. I'll send one of the others to you at some point tomorrow to check in." Conry nodded. Malthus continued, "When we are before Maura, I'll need you to be there to help if we're confronted by any of the officers. Of course. You are to report to the guard captain under the name of Taksu. Kazakh has added that name to the roll call. If you're given any trouble, request that he be brought in to vouch for you." Malthus leaned in closer. "I want you to watch him, and if you feel he poses a threat, don't hesitate to do what you must." "Yes, chieftain." "I have known you your whole life, Conry. You've grown out of your father's shadow. It's not easy being the son of a chieftain. He spoke highly of you, and he was right to do so. Thank you, chieftain. All I ask for is the opportunity to serve you, Shilkaitis." It was a rote answer, but Malthus could tell it was from the heart. He fitted Conry with one of the uniforms. The brown leather jerkin fit snugly, tied with a red sash around the waist, the tips of which were brown and black. The leather plates of armor mimicked scales after he strapped them onto Conry's chest, back, and shoulders, red linen peeking out from underneath. The helmet covered everything but his eyes and mouth, the crown of the piece forged in bronze. For the finishing touch, he affixed Maura's seal to the breast of Conry's jerkin. "Maybe I should have been a soldier," Conry quipped, chuckling. "It fits well." "Good," Malthus said. He hesitated to send him off, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "There's one more thing before you go." Something I don't want you to share with any of the others. What is it, chieftain? Malthus shared his final orders with Conry before sending him on his way. He remained in the basement to plot in solitude, reviewing every detail of the plan meticulously. He visualized them entering the temple, coming before Maura, the beheading of the war god, the look of shock in the eyes of the people. But one pair of eyes stood out from the entire crowd. Malthus shook, distracting himself from the vision. He stroked the stubble on his lip, gray like his scales. "Have I failed you, brother?" he asked. If his brother's ghost could speak, Malthus had no idea what he'd say. Together they'd come up with a plan to assassinate one of the gods as proof of their mortality. They had been young chieftains back then, but Malthus's brother had been dead a long time now. Doubts started to creep in. He called into question every decision he'd made. Was it worth it? Would this accomplish anything? He spent a long hour in turmoil, remembering that his mistakes could come at the cost of his thalosai. He remembered all the times it had before. This time had to be different. Charlize brought down wine and bread, and he ate it to distract himself more than to satisfy his stomach. Midnight came and passed. The home grew silent, and the air in the basement became cool. Malthus quieted his anxious thoughts and took to sleep on his cot in the corner, knowing that nothing would be decided until it was done. He left the lantern burning on the table, the waning flame dancing behind its glass cage. The flame and the shadows brought him back to the other night, to the abandoned home where Ruko and Yataki had been killed. But it was not the sight of their deaths that he relived, or their cries that haunted him. It was those eyes, the same ones he had seen in his vision of the crowd earlier. He couldn't escape them. Have I failed you too? There was only one way to find out.